You, sir, are a disgrace. This entire court is compromised. I will expose every single one of you.
Richard Sterling walked into the federal courtroom, a custom-tailored pinstripe suit worth $5,000, a solid gold Rolex gleaming under the chandeliers, the stride of an absolute ruler, 12 years as mayor, absolute power, dubbed the king of the city. Today, he stood at the defendant's podium. The charges, 50 counts of corruption, extortion, and abuse of power. He smirked, waving to the reporters as if he were walking a red carpet. He believed this courtroom was just like his office, that he could buy, threaten, or manipulate anything. But he had never faced Judge Simpson. Imagine this: an entire city bled dry. Your tax dollars, instead of building hospitals and schools, flowing into secret offshore accounts. Thousands of hardworking lives struggling for every penny, while the man at the top lives in luxury built on their blood, sweat, and tears. Do you feel that anger boiling in your chest? If you believe that no one is allowed to stand above the law, watch closely what is about to unfold. This isn't just a trial. This is the end of a corrupt empire. The heavy doors opened. Judge Simpson walked in. The room instantly fell into a suffocating silence. No polite smiles, no friendly nods. Simpson's gaze was as sharp as a blade, piercing right through Sterling's arrogant facade. Case number 2024-099X, the United States versus Richard Sterling, has begun. Sterling spoke first, his tone condescending, completely ignoring courtroom protocol. Judge Simpson, I think we can wrap this up quickly. These charges are nothing but political garbage. I have dedicated 12 years to this city. I am this city. He adjusted his tie, looking incredibly smug. He was used to everyone bowing down to him. He thought that the leather chair the judge sat in was just another commodity that could be negotiated with money. Judge Simpson lightly tapped the wooden gavel. The dry, firm sound echoed like a thunderclap. Mr. Sterling, out there you might be the mayor. You might be whoever you want to be. But in my courtroom, you are nothing but a defendant. And I do not care how expensive your suit is. Keep your mouth shut until I give you permission to speak. Sterling froze. The smirk vanished from his lips. In 12 long years, no one had ever dared to speak to him in that tone. His pride and ego were dealt a lethal blow in the very first minutes. This was no ordinary trial. This was the place where the illusion of power was stripped away, where those who call themselves untouchable must face cold justice. He tried to maintain his defiant expression, but his hands had already begun to clench tight. He didn't know yet that Judge Simpson already held the fatal secret that would destroy him. The prosecutor stepped forward, dropping a heavy leather-bound folder onto the solid wooden desk. The thud echoed through the silent courtroom like a ticking bomb. Sterling's high-priced defense attorney, a man who charged $1,000 an hour to make guilty people look innocent, immediately stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This so-called evidence was obtained illegally. My client has absolute immunity. You cannot touch him. We will drag this court through years of appeals until you are ruined. Sterling leaned back, that arrogant smirk slowly creeping back onto his face. He looked at Judge Simpson as if to say, I told you so. This was his playbook. Delay, threaten, bury them in paperwork. It had worked perfectly for 12 years. But Judge Simpson didn't even look at the defense attorney. He kept his piercing gaze locked entirely on Sterling. Overruled, Simpson said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the heavy weight of absolute authority. You seem to misunderstand where you are, Mr. Sterling. You think your expensive lawyers are a shield? They are nothing but a fragile curtain, and I am about to tear it down. Let me ask you, watching this, how many times have you seen the rich and powerful hide behind legal technicalities? How many times have you watched the evening news, feeling that sickening knot in your stomach when a corrupt politician walks free just because they could afford a better legal team? It makes you feel helpless, doesn't it? It makes you feel like the entire system is rigged against honest, hardworking people like you. But not today. Today, we are breaking the wheel. Judge Simpson opened the leather folder with agonizing slowness. I have here a ledger, Simpson announced, holding up a single, undeniable piece of paper. Not a bank statement, not a forged tax return, but the hidden handwritten ledger kept by your own chief of staff. It details every bribe, every stolen tax dollar, and every life you ruined to build your pathetic empire, including the $3 million you stole from the Children's Hospital Fund just to buy your private vacation home. The color completely drained from Sterling's face. The smirk vanished, replaced by a pale, hollow look of sheer panic. The solid gold Rolex on his wrist suddenly looked like a heavy shackle. His attorney began stammering, trying to interject, but Simpson raised a single hand, silencing the entire room instantly. "You told me you are this city, Mr. Sterling." Simpson leaned forward, the shadow of the judicial bench making him look like an unstoppable force of nature. "If you are this city, then this city is sick, and I am the cure." Sterling gripped the edge of the defense table, his knuckles turning stark white. His empire, built on a decade of lies, greed, and intimidation, was crumbling in mere seconds under the crushing weight of the truth. The untouchable mayor was finally suffocating in the very courtroom he thought he could buy. Judge Simpson stared intently at the cold sweat beading on Sterling's deeply lined forehead. In this moment, the physical signs could not lie. The arrogant, domineering lines on his face were contracting, giving way to absolute terror. He had once used those very hands, now trembling and slick with sweat, to sign documents that stripped away the livelihoods of thousands of families. Now, those same hands were gripping the edge of the defense table like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Simpson's voice rang out, deep and carrying the crushing weight of justice. "Do you have any idea what the $3 million you stole actually means? Those aren't just lifeless numbers hastily scribbled in a hidden ledger. That is life support. That is life-saving medication. That is the tiny sliver of hope for the children at the Central Hospital. Hope that you ruthlessly extinguished just so you could afford luxurious vacations in Europe. My friends, have you ever felt that suffocating anger rise in your throat when you see the rich and powerful steal the very right to live from the most vulnerable? Try to imagine the agonizing pain of a mother, staying awake all night by her child's hospital bed, shedding tears of utter helplessness because she cannot pay the medical bills, while the criminal responsible is toasting with expensive champagne on $1 million yacht. That outrage, that repressed frustration we've carried for years, is being washed away today. Judge Simpson isn't just trying a greedy individual. He is delivering a punishing blow on behalf of tens of thousands of voiceless people. Sterling's defense attorney, a man who charged thousands of dollars an hour to bend the law, tried to salvage whatever dignity was left. "Your Honor, my client did not directly manage that fund. He is the mayor. His massive workload makes administrative errors inevitable. This is a blatant smear campaign designed to destroy his reputation." Judge Simpson smirked, a cold, piercing smile that sent a shiver through the massive courtroom. He calmly pulled a tiny USB drive from the black dossier. "I knew you would argue that. The villain always loves to hide behind others and blame their subordinates. But your rotten system had a massive leak, Sterling. There were people who simply couldn't stomach your cruelty anymore." Simpson signaled the court clerk. An audio recording began to play. Sterling's own voice echoed loud and clear through the dead silent room. "Just pull the money from the hospital fund. Nobody cares about those sick orphans anyway. Wire it directly to the Cayman account. Wipe the trail clean." The tape ended. The silence in the room was terrifying, as if time itself had stopped. Sterling collapsed entirely into his wooden chair. His eyes were glazed over, completely empty. The glamorous mask of power had been completely ripped away, exposing a soul that was rotten, cruel, and ultimately cowardly. The absolute power he had always boasted about was nothing but a castle built on sand, and Judge Simpson had just unleashed a Category 5 hurricane, wiping all those lies away forever. Sterling's high-paid lawyer, the man who had confidently promised a quick dismissal just an hour ago, slowly began packing his leather briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. "Your Honor," Sterling choked out, his voice now a pathetic, trembling whisper. The booming, authoritative tone of the king of the city was completely gone. I can make restitution. I have properties. I have offshore accounts. I can give it all back. Every single penny. Just please, let's make a deal." "A deal? Think about that for a second." That is the ultimate insult to every hardworking person watching this, isn't it? To think that decades of destroyed lives, of stolen futures, and of unimaginable calculated greed could just be swept under the rug with a quick financial transaction. Have you ever noticed how the most ruthless, arrogant people suddenly become the biggest cowards the exact moment they have to face the real consequences of their actions? They act like hungry wolves when they are preying on the weak and the defenseless. But the very second the trap snaps shut on them, they whine and beg like helpless pups. Judge Simpson leaned forward, his expression entirely devoid of mercy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. A deal, Mr. Sterling. Do you think justice is a marketplace? You cannot buy your way out of the sheer devastation you have caused. You treated this entire city like your personal piggy bank, and you treated its vulnerable citizens like acceptable collateral damage. You are not a king. You are just a common thief hiding inside a very expensive suit. And today your bank is permanently closed. Simpson raised his wooden gavel. Given the overwhelming, undeniable evidence, the extreme flight risk presented by your hidden assets, and the staggering magnitude of your crimes against the public, bail is completely and unconditionally denied. You are remanded immediately into federal custody pending trial. No, you can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? I own this city, Sterling screamed. It was a sudden, desperate burst of his old toxic arrogance returning as two heavy-set federal marshals approached his table. But the courtroom remained dead silent. No one flinched. No one cared. The illusion was completely broken. The marshals grabbed his trembling arms. Take off the watch, one of them ordered coldly. Sterling fumbled with shaking fingers, finally unbuckling the solid gold Rolex he had flaunted for years. It clattered onto the wooden defense table, suddenly looking like a hollow, meaningless piece of cheap metal. In its place, the cold, heavy steel of federal handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Click, click. Listen to that sound. That is the beautiful, uncompromising sound of absolute justice. The man who thought he was a god among men was now just another numbered inmate, being dragged out the back door in total disgrace. Watch him walk away. The man who thought he was a god among men, now stumbling under the weight of his own disgrace. As the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swing shut behind Richard Sterling, the atmosphere inside fundamentally shifts. The suffocating, toxic tension suddenly breaks. You can almost hear the collective exhale of an entire city that has been held hostage for 12 agonizing years. Look at the gallery. Sitting in the back row is a woman named Eleanor. Her husband was a dedicated small business owner, a man who poured his heart and soul into his neighborhood grocery store. But Sterling's brutal extortion rackets, disguised as mandatory city zoning fees, bled them dry. They lost their business, their life savings, and eventually her husband's health deteriorated from the unbearable stress. Right now, Eleanor is weeping silently into her hands. But these are no longer tears of sorrow or despair. They are tears of profound, overwhelming relief. In less than an hour, Judge Simpson didn't just hand down a legal ruling. He validated Eleanor's years of silent suffering. He looked the monster straight in the eye and stripped him of his fangs. This is why we desperately crave justice, isn't it? When you see a man like Sterling finally fall, what do you feel in your core? It isn't just a desire for vengeance. It is a deep, primal need for balance in the universe. It is the ultimate reassurance that no matter how high a tower of corruption reaches, no matter how much stolen gold is plastered on its walls, it is fundamentally hollow and will eventually collapse under the weight of truth. Meanwhile, picture Sterling in the holding cell deep beneath the courthouse. The $5,000 custom suit is already wrinkling. The sycophants, the bodyguards, the corrupt politicians he bought, they are all gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. The luxurious penthouse office with panoramic views of his empire has been replaced by cold, unforgiving concrete and thick steel bars. For the first time in his adult life, he is entirely alone. There is no one left to manipulate, no one left to bribe. There is just the deafening silence of a cage and the terrifying, suffocating realization that all his millions cannot buy the air he breathes in this dark room. The untouchable king of the city has been completely erased. reduced to nothing more than a prisoner waiting for a number to replace his name. Let's step out of that cold, concrete cell for a moment and look at the world outside. When Judge Simpson brought that heavy wooden gavel down, he didn't just lock away one corrupt mayor. He shattered an entire deep-rooted network of corruption. It was the domino effect of absolute justice. The very next morning, the city woke up to a completely different reality. The multi-million-dollar vacation home in Europe, immediately seized by the federal government, those secret offshore bank accounts hidden in the Caymans, frozen, dismantled, and repatriated. But let's talk about what really matters. Remember the $3 million stolen from the Children's Hospital Fund? The money Sterling used to fund his lavish lifestyle while innocent families suffered? Within weeks of Judge Simpson's ruling, that money is legally routed back to exactly where it belongs. I want you to imagine the faces of those exhausted nurses, the desperate parents, when the new state-of-the-art life support machines finally arrive. Imagine the profound relief of knowing their children will survive because the system finally worked. That is the true, undeniable power of a righteous courtroom. It's not just about punishing the wicked, it's about healing the deeply wounded. Now, let's analyze Sterling's pride, his bloated, untouchable ego. Think about all his high society friends, the elite politicians who used to laugh at his terrible jokes, the wealthy CEOs who used to pour him vintage scotch at exclusive country clubs. The exact moment those steel handcuffs clicked around his wrists, every single one of them deleted his number. They publicly condemned him, scrambling like rats off a sinking ship to save their own reputations. That is the ultimate crushing humiliation for a narcissist. To sit in a dark cell and realize that no one actually respected him. They only feared his power and wanted his money. And now that Judge Simpson has ruthlessly stripped both of those things away, Richard Sterling is utterly, entirely irrelevant. Have you ever dealt with someone like that? A boss, a local official, or a bully who thought they were completely invincible? Someone who laughed in your face because they truly believed the rules simply didn't apply to them? Sterling was the ultimate version of that bully. And seeing him reduced to an irrelevant, forgotten prisoner proves a vital point. No matter how deep the rot goes, no matter how thick the illusion of power is, the blinding light of justice can and will disinfect it. Let's zoom out from Richard Sterling for a moment. His reign of terror is officially over. He is now just a cautionary tale, a broken man locked behind federal steel. But the story of Judge Simpson's courtroom has just begun. Why does this specific moment hit us so incredibly hard? Why do we feel such a profound sense of satisfaction watching a corrupt mayor lose everything? It is because we have all been conditioned for years to accept a broken reality. We are constantly taught to expect that the rich and powerful will only ever get a slap on the wrist, while the average, hard-working citizen gets the book thrown at them for the smallest mistake. We have been suffocated by a two-tiered justice system, but Judge Simpson represents the ultimate equalizer. When he sits at that heavy wooden bench, the scales of justice are not weighted by campaign contributions, high-priced lawyers, or offshore accounts. In his courtroom, the law is entirely blind to your bank balance, but it has perfect, razor-sharp vision for your character. I want you to imagine the sheer panic echoing through the luxury penthouses and corrupt corporate boardrooms across the state the morning after Sterling's arrest. Imagine the frantic late-night phone calls, the panicked shredding of confidential documents, the sudden terrifying realization sweeping through the political elite that the Sterling method of bribery and intimidation is no longer a guarantee of safety. Judge Simpson didn't just strike a wooden gavel. He struck a match and dropped it right into the heart of their corrupt infrastructure. This is the true power of absolute, uncompromising accountability. It sends a massive shockwave that violently disrupts the comfortable, untouchable lives of predators who wear designer suits. For years, you might have felt a deep, exhausting cynicism. You might have watched the evening news and felt completely apathetic, thinking that the game is permanently rigged against honest, everyday people. You might have thought that speaking up or demanding better was completely useless. But what happened in Judge Simpson's courtroom proves that the rot can be carved out. It proves that the system can be cleansed, but it requires unyielding courage. It requires a leader who refuses to be intimidated by empty threats and fake power. It reminds us that justice isn't just an abstract concept written in old books. It is a living, breathing force that can change the world the moment someone is brave enough to enforce it. The massive federal courtroom slowly empties. The frantic reporters rush out into the hallways, desperate to break the news of the century. But the victims, the everyday people who were crushed under Sterling's greed, they linger. They stand in the aisles, hugging each other tightly, their tears of profound relief soaking into each other's shoulders. The heavy, suffocating, dark cloud that hung over this city for 12 years has finally been lifted. And at the center of it all, Judge Simpson quietly gathers his files. He doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate or pose for the cameras. For him, this isn't a victory lap or a performance. It is simply the execution of his sworn, unbreakable duty. He walks out through the heavy wooden doors behind the bench, leaving behind a room that feels lighter, cleaner, and fundamentally restored. So, what is the ultimate lesson of Richard Sterling's spectacular downfall? It's not just about one bad man going to a federal prison. It is about exposing the profound fragility of corrupt power. For a decade, Sterling sold the terrifying illusion that he was a giant, but Judge Simpson exposed him for exactly what he truly was. A very small, very frightened coward hiding behind a fragile wall of stolen money. When you strip away the designer suits, the expensive defense lawyers, and the bought-off politicians, all that remains is the naked truth. And the truth is the one thing a corrupt mind absolutely cannot survive. If you are watching this right now, maybe you are dealing with your own version of Richard Sterling. Maybe it's a toxic, narcissistic boss, a corrupt local official, or a bureaucratic system that feels completely stacked against you. You might feel incredibly small. You might feel entirely voiceless. But I want you to remember the sharp, heavy sound of those steel handcuffs clicking shut. Remember the look of absolute soul-crushing terror on the face of a man who genuinely thought he owned the world. Judge Simpson is more than just a man in a black robe. He is the ultimate reminder that karma, justice, and truth have a remarkably perfect memory. They might be delayed, they might be obstructed, but they are never, ever denied. We desperately need more moments of true accountability like this. We need to remind the untouchable elites that their pedestals are made of highly fragile glass. If this story stirred something deep inside you, if it made you believe, even just a little bit more, that absolute justice still exists, then do not let the momentum stop here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers, because we are going to keep shining a blinding, unforgiving light on the darkest shadows. Until next time, keep your head high, stand your ground, and always remember, in the ultimate courtroom of life, the truth always delivers the final verdict.